Hi, my name is Annette Cuddy, Director, Centre of Nurse and Midwifery Education, Mayo Roscommon.
And I'm Cora Appleby, Specialist Coordinator, Centre for Nurse and Midwifery Education, Mayo Roscommon.
And you're very welcome to our Inclusion Health Voices from the Margins podcast series. We're coming to an end of the podcast series. This is a bonus episode for Series 2. Today, we are delighted to be joined by Anthony Kavanagh, Fleadh Coordinator, and Mairéad Loftus Dunford. Mairéad will be familiar to our listeners as one of the hosts of this podcast series. Today, she's on the other side of the table. In today's episode, Cora and I will chat to Anthony and Mairéad about a very special initiative that started in Mayo last year, the Mayo Comhaltas Cuimsiú initiative, a winner of the Mayo Comhaltas Awards in the Contribution to Community Life category. So Anthony, if it's okay, we'll start with yourself. And for those of us who are not familiar with it, can you tell us a little bit about Comhaltas? What is it all about?
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Annette, and it's great to be here with everyone this evening. So, I suppose Comhaltas was founded back in 1951. There was a team that was assembled, I suppose, in Mullingar who seen maybe a decline in Irish traditional music and our culture in general. So they had a number of different initiatives, I suppose, to bring back music, song, dance, and our language, and to really promote, I suppose, the Irish tradition and to bring it back to what it would have been, in the early 20s and 30s. So the organisation has really expanded throughout the years. There has been good times and bad times, I suppose. But the organisation, as long as I've been involved since 2005, 2006, has really been on the up and up. And it has been, a really transformative organisation, I think, for young people to really express themselves in our music, in our song, in our dance, and in our language. So the organisation, I suppose, it's founded on a branch, a county, a province, and then a national setup. So there would be committees at all of those different levels. In Mayo, we have 14 branches and one county board, and then a provincial council, and then our national body then, which would be the Ard Comhaltas. Down through the years, I would have sat on all different levels of the organisation, and it's really impressive to see the work that's been done at every level. You get a very good appreciation for what's been done to promote our culture in all of its different forms. And I suppose Comhaltas in general then in recent years has really branched out, that we now have branches in loads of different countries, Argentina, out in Australia. There's branches everywhere, Singapore. So the organisation is really a national organisation now. And as people would be aware, the All-Ireland Fleadh has just grown year on year. Last year alone, there was over 600,000 people in Wexford. And again, similar numbers planned, I suppose, for next year. So I suppose at a high level, that would be Comhaltas and the main foundation for Comhaltas at the various different levels.
Okay, so national and international by the sounds.
Absolutely,
Very good.
Yeah.
So it sounds a bit like the GAA, just for people that would...
Yeah, that would be the first cousin, I suppose, of it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you have your club, you have your county, you have your province, yeah. And your role there, you're Fleadh Coordinator.
Yeah, so I suppose I have the lovely job of combining timetables, entries, adjudicators, call stewards, bring it all together, along with an enormous team of volunteers on the county board who really row in for the weekend to make the event a success. So we've just completed our entries for this year, and we're well in excess of 700 entries at the Mayo County Fleadh this year, which is a really, really significant participation over the 10th and 11th of May.
Wow, that is... So, and I suppose our interest in this, Mairéad and Anthony, came, the Glór Ahamór magazine is published every year, and this year we saw an article in it by Ellen Hines, and the article is called Cuimsiú, Creating an Inclusive Fleadh. And there was a photo in it, and there was a young lady in the photo that was somewhat familiar to me, by the name of Hannah Dunford. So we just felt reading the article, it's a fabulous article, and we might read something out of it later, but it kind of reflected social inclusion at a community level. And we just felt when we talked among ourselves, and I know you have been involved, and you'll talk about that now, but it was really in keeping with the aim of this podcast, which is why we're here today. And Mairéad, you were involved in the initiative Cuimsiú. Give us the background to how that came about.
This is so strange to be on the other side. But anyhow, and just for our listeners, when this was mooted by my two colleagues here, Cora and Annette, first of all, I said no. But Annette is quite persuasive. But and it probably does fit the initiative. So I suppose initially, my daughter Hannah, just for the listeners, she's 15 and she has Down syndrome. But Down syndrome is only one part of Hannah. She's a very outgoing girl and she's involved in lots of activities. And she's a girl that sees no barriers. So she has an 18-year-old brother. So whatever her brother can do, she can do better in so many ways, so she claims. So she was back in Achill in 2022, watching her brother compete in the Mayo County Fleadh. So she said to her dad on the way out, when am I competing in the Fleadh and what can I compete in the Fleadh? So we're from the other side of the county. So as he was driving home, he thought about this and he said, yeah, she's right actually. When can she complete in the Fleadh? So roll on, he pondered that for a little while and then he contacted the secretary of the branch that Hannah's in, which is Admiral Brown. The secretary's Adele Doherty, and he mooted it with her, would this be a possibility to bring to the county board? And Adele duly brought it to the county board, who scoped it out a little bit and, thought about it. And then we were invited to a meeting. And when we were invited to the meeting to scope it out a bit further, I thought we were only one voice of one disability group. So I contacted colleagues in a voluntary organisation, charity organisation called ARC, which supports children and young people with disabilities in Mayo. And ARC isn't about waiting lists or that. ARC is about inclusion in community. And really that fitted the model that we were trying to promote. So we came to a meeting, and I'll always remember that meeting, and I felt we were pushing an open door, really. And really what struck me that night was pushing an open door, but people were, I suppose, it wasn't really fair, Anthony. I think it was more concerned, would they do something that would cause harm, or would they use the wrong word, or how would you set this up and whatever. And then we went back and there was another meeting after that. And that meeting was much more animated because people really started to think about how could we implement this. And I suppose for me, I've spent years going to Fleadhs with our 18-year-old, from the whole way up the ranges. And what blew me away at that particular meeting was the insight that this group had with regard to the possibilities that were there. And it was all really, I suppose, to include somebody, we'll say, whether it be Hannah who has Down syndrome, or somebody who's autism, or somebody who has a physical disability, or whether it's, whatever it is, it's reasonable accommodations that you're seeking out. And I suppose that's what blew me away was, the open door and the level of detail that the people at that meeting that night were considering. And I suppose I can't really talk any more about that because we've the flag coordinator here, so we better get him to talk about what those reasonable accommodations were.
The main thing, Mairéad, I suppose, was that, especially in our initial meetings, was that we listened to the team from ARC, and in fairness, they came forward with some fantastic ideas. Things that, we may not have really considered in the ordinary run-of-the-mill, under 12, under 15, under 18 competitions. So I suppose it was maybe just to understand, some subtle nuances that we had to look into to make the experience enjoyable for everyone, because we wanted everyone to come to the Fleadh, have a good experience, enjoy their competition, and enjoy the experience of the Fleadh, because the last thing that we want is someone to have a bad experience and be completely turned off against music competing in the future. There was a small team of us, I suppose, that came together. We had a couple of different standing meetings to make this work. So what we did was we came up with a couple of items and a social story that basically explained to the competitors, this is what you will expect to see on the day of the Cuimsiú competition. So from the moment that they enter the car park, we had the pictures of, this is the door that you will enter to pay your entry fee. This is where you will register for your competition. If you wish to use the restrooms or you wish to use the facilities of the quiet room, they're also available to you. Then we made some accommodations when we were setting out the entry form, which was, when you entered the room, would you like to have an audience present? Would you like a support person alongside you as you perform? Be that a singer, be it another musician, be it just someone to sit in the chair beside you. And God, if I had that, I would be delighted when I was competing. But I think then you sort of step through all of the various different elements that a competitor will come towards. So then I suppose you're in the seat now and you're ready to perform. However, we want to be conscious about, the actions of the adjudicator, the actions of the call steward. Would you like an applause? Because that might be something that would off-put you. Ellen was very, very accommodating to us as an adjudicator and had a great experience and great expertise around how best to set up the competition. But what we agreed on was that we wouldn't write the adjudication sheet as the competitor was competing. They got full, undivided attention from everyone in the room. There wouldn't be any tapping of the foot, which would be the go-to response when someone starts to play or someone starts to sing. And I suppose it's all just being cognizant of the fact that, little subtleties like that can have a huge impact on any performer. I know myself in my competing days, if someone stopped writing when I was playing, you start to think or you start to question yourself. So it was just little things like that. And in fairness, Magella, who was our call steward, and Ellen were absolutely fantastic, along with all of the volunteers that we had, both Comhaltas and ARC volunteers. And really, we had no issue getting a team of people together to work on this project, because being quite honest about it, we were oversubscribed with all of the help that we wanted. And I think there was such an energy around that particular venue that people that were working on the 15 to 18 and the senior competition wanted to see what was the Cuimsiú competition, how was it running, how was the logistical nuances of an audience without an audience going to work? How did all of the volunteers interact with each other? How did the competitors feel while the competitions were ongoing? More importantly, how did the parents feel? And I suppose there was lots of learnings that we took from the competition, but I think overall, everyone had such a positive experience from it. And I think that was down to, the people that were there on the day and the planning that went on in advance. So I think the people from the county board and from ARC really pulled together, and it was, it really kind of cements, I think, the Comhaltas ethos, and especially now with the release of their Prospectus 2030, that we do need to be more open, we do need to be more inclusive in our society, we need to give everyone an equal opportunity to showcase their talents. And I think Cuimsiú is a perfect example of what every county board and every provincial council should be striving for as we move forward. So I think it's a great step and a great start in Mayo, and hopefully others will take on the baton and take on the competition.
I think Kerry are this year, aren't they, Anthony? Kerry have
there's been lots of different county boards that have been in contact, but I think it's maybe to formulate a bit of a plan moving forward. And there's different initiatives. There's a metal team being set up at the moment. So I think as we move through, 25, 26, there's definitely opportunities for expansion of the Cuimsiú concept. I think, last year we were very much learning as to how Cuimsiú would run. But I think every 12 months is not enough to keep everyone engaged. And I think there's great scope for music classes or workshops or sessions, and they're things that we hope to, I suppose, explore moving forward in whatever committee, whatever level of the organisation it will be.
Mairéad, the word Cuimsiú, what does that mean?
That is the Irish word for inclusion. And it attracted us because the first letter is C. So the first letter, Ceol, is C as well. So it comes together. Inclusion is a funny old word, and you probably often hear me say that across the coffee table. But inclusion can often become exclusion, and you have to be careful with that. And I suppose from the experience of having been involved with Comhaltas with this was that the Mayo Comhaltas aren't striving for exclusion. They actually want to move it on and make it inclusion. And so that's why that word reasonable accommodations is so important, because reasonable accommodations, what you're actually looking for is equity. So if you think of that picture, it's the 3 boxes. We're looking for the equity one. And that's what's really important. And I suppose from our perspective, the families, when we came forward at those meetings, I think at one of the early meetings, Anthony, I think we said we didn't want a charitable model. We didn't want this to be tokenistic, that it is a competition. And that's what it is. It's a competition. There'll be a first, second and a third. But the under 10 competition is very much run that to encourage people. So if you don't come first, second or third, that you get a certificate as well. But also that it's an opportunity for people to display their talents. I might just tell a little story there about one lad who's been attending group classes for years. And I got a phone call on the street. My number and I think Adele's number were down for the contact last year. And I was walking down a street in the town I live in, and got a phone call, and the mother said hello, and I said hello back, and then the two of us recognised each other because the disability community, we're a small community. Well, we're not a small community, we're a large community, but you kind of know, you come across paths. So we talked about the Cuimsiú competition, and she was actually very emotional from the minute she came on the phone call. And her story was that about a week or 2 weeks beforehand, her son had been at the group classes, and all the other children at the classes were picking their tunes for the Fleadh. And he came home and he said to his mother, like he has done every year, and said, "Can I go to the Fleadh?" And she, like every year, she said her heart would break, because she knew that even though he's a nice musician, that to take part in the mainstream competitions would be a challenge because the reasonable accommodations weren't there. So she said to him, "Yeah, we'll go over to the Fleadh." But that's not what he wanted. He wanted to be in there in front of the adjudicator and to challenge himself, like everybody else that goes into competition. And competition isn't for everybody, but that's what he wanted. He wanted to be like the others. And she was quite emotional on the phone because she said, now when he comes in from school today, I'm not just going to be bringing him over to look at the Fleadh. He's actually entering the Fleadh. So we did have a film crew there in the background on the day, and we had decided that we'd film him coming in. But he was so nervous on the day because he's had years waiting to compete, that on the morning he was actually really nervous that he was actually finally a competitor at the Fleadh. Anyhow, he brought home the medals, and just up from the Cuimsiú, where the rooms for the Cuimsiú competition was the board. There's always a board with all the lists of the competition, and then the results go up on it. And what was so lovely was, and for me this signified that it had come full circle, because he would attend the sessions in his particular Comhaltas branch. And a lot of the young people around his own age would encourage him and look out for him at the sessions. But they came down to actually see where he was on the leaderboard, and they were all up looking at the leaderboard. He was now one of the lads. And the thing was, his music teacher was down to see him as well from school. And he went back into school at 10 foot tall and with confidence. He now always was fully part of his Comhaltas. He was no longer sort of sitting on the edge. And for the families, and particularly I suppose for me, that's what the whole thing was about. Do you know what I mean? And it didn't matter whether he was placed or not. It was those young lads, I can still see them coming down to check out how did he get on. Because that's what my young fellas had for years. How did you get on?
Carolyn, what are you going to play on the whistle?
The Rattlin Bog.
The Rattling Bog. Thank you very, very much.
Did you have eligibility criteria?
We had discussions around the eligibility criteria, because obviously if you were in the under 12 mainstream competition, you couldn't compete in the Cuimsiú competition, the under 12. But the eligibility, we kind of allied it with the eligibility of membership for ARC, which was that you had to be eligible for access to disability services.
Mairéad, what does Cuimsiú mean to your family?
What does it mean? Well, I just saw a young girl, and you know her. She's no shrinking violet. But anyhow, I saw a young girl travelling over in the car to Westport, the 30 odd miles, and her brother in the car, and there was another musician in the car as well. And she's used to, watching him prep and his friends prep for competition. She was doing that. And then sometimes, on competition day, even though competitors are looking forward to it, they might be a little bit tense because they'll have looked at the clore and they'll have sized up who the competition is. And so sometimes she may have been told in the past, shh, in other words, she was doing it to the other two musicians in the car. And for me, that was a change. And then when we walk in, and she went in, and a girl that she's actually got friendly with now since the Fleadh. They would have come across each other over the years, but they struck up a friendship that day. The other thing was that particular girl, and I think her mom won't mind me saying her name because I was chatting to her earlier, Maya. I remember when Maya competed, as she walked down after competing, she went, "Yes, I did it." So that's what it was about. And for Hannah, it's been the friendships that have been created since. She's a now full member of a community. She went back to a session in Achill at Scoil about 2 or 3 weeks later. And normally she'd kind of sit around where her brother is and his friends. And she did not. She was now fully fledged. She went off over and sat with some girls she'd never met before. And that's the beauty of music, and the Comhaltas model as well, is you're playing music with all different age groups. So you learn a lot. And you're brought in from a young age and you're encouraged. And I often think musicians are very understanding. So you have musicians that have played at a high level, like Anthony here. And I saw Anthony down in Guiry's. He played with Hannah on the banjo, and I think she was on the bowron, was she? Yeah. And there's another lad, Fiachra Caulfield. I think he met you above in Claremorris. But that's not, Anthony isn't just, lots of musicians within Comhaltas. And it's because of the mix of age groups. But for our Hannah, and we'll say the likes of Maya, they've competed now. So they actually feel that they fully belong. And I think that's really what it's about. And as a family, there was somebody in the room that particular day who would have known the family. Said she teared up when she saw Irla was playing for Hannah when she was playing the bowron. And they got to compete together. And oftentimes in competition, siblings get to compete together, to play together. And that was the first time that they got to play together. And I think as a family too, I remember walking by, and this was when there was the no audience competition. It was the first competitor on the day. And I remember walking by, and the hair went up in the back. I probably get emotional now talking about it because I'm still overwhelmed. But I had to gather myself. I was there like, I can't believe this. Our community, which is part of the broader community, is now fully there, and arts is really for everybody. Professor Seamus Caulfield, people may know him from, he's associated with the Cage of Fields. And I saw him arrive. I was thinking, what's Seamus Caulfield doing here? Couldn't fathom out why Seamus Caulfield was here. And then I saw him wander off into a room, and I was thinking, why is he there? Then I saw a young lad playing, and then I saw Seamus coming out, and he had tears in his eyes. And he just said that was the proudest moment. And I just will you indulge? I'll just read something here that Seamus Caulfield wrote just about, and I have his permission to read this. He said, "When I passed the mid-80s milestone of my life, I did not expect that the supreme moment of joy in my life was still ahead of me. But on the 12th of May 2024, at an integral competition in Fleadh in Westport, I experienced that supreme moment as I listened to a 10-year-old play without notes, Shane Malay on the Fadog Stone. The 10-year-old was my grandson, Fiachra. And what made the occasion so special for me was that Fiachra's Down syndrome means that for certain part of his life he has additional needs, but that for other parts he most certainly does not. His standing up with confidence and playing before the judges, and later before a wider audience, told me that music is one area in which he has no additional need." And I think that kind of sums up the day. I know you asked me, Cora, what did it mean to me? But for me, it's not about our Hannah, it's about the broader community. And I asked thinking about today, I asked another mother, what did it mean for her? Because we're only one voice, do you know, and what impact has it had on her daughter's life, who's 17? And she said it was life-changing. She now has a community, friendships. She discovered her daughter had hidden talents. She said contentment, quite a lot of happiness. She has something to talk about. She feels involved. But one thing that struck me that she said, and here we are in a HSE podcast, but one thing that struck me, she said, it was the profound impact on her health and wellness. That she was countered her loneliness, that she was beginning to feel lonely. Because there isn't the same opportunities when you have a disability as you go up in years. And the other thing that struck me was she said she was having quite a lot of difficulty with sleep. But over the last few months, her sleep has improved because of the power of being involved in this initiative.
What age group categories did you use for Cuimsiú?
The ages are under 12, under 15, under 18 and over 18, so very much replicated what would be run-of-the-mill for the ordinary competitions, and then broken down into the various different categories, so singing, music, fiddle, tin whistle, bowron, whatever the case may be, miscellaneous competitions. Last year we had 15 competitors in total, and some of them competed in multiple competitions, so 23 competitions overall. This year we have 19 competing, and they're taking part in 31 different competitions and categories, so maybe it kind of shows that maybe last year was a stepping stone to try out different competitions, be it singing, be it dancing, be it something outside of what might have been, their preferred instrument or preferred category of music, song or dance. And I suppose we're running the competition in the same fashion as last year. But I think, Mairéad, you said two important things, and I would resonate with them. I think music does two things to me. One is it relaxes me no end. So when I have a stressful day, the banjo will get an awful hammer, and when it comes home, it's mighty for relaxing the mind. You have to be totally committed and totally focused on what you're doing. It is really good for relaxing. So normally if I'm playing music, I do normally sleep that bit better in the evenings. But I think music in general, not just the Cuimsiú competition, but music in general is very inclusive. I think we sometimes just need to maybe push the door a little bit and reach out to the likes of the county boards, and there is people there that are more than willing and able to run something like a Cuimsiú. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but I think there's great people in our organisation, and I think there's great prospects for the concept of Cuimsiú.
And it's about the whole family and the whole community,
Absolutely,
isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's really where we want to get to.
Can I just ask you if both of you or one of you want to give a key message?
I think both of us probably are coming from a different angle. So I'm probably coming from the family point of view. So the lesson, as a family, don't be afraid. If you're involved with an organisation, particularly a voluntary organisation, volunteerism is a big part of this. We can't have any of these initiatives unless people step up. And even within the disability community and the broader community, you have to step up. Volunteerism is very important. I have about 3 messages here, Cora.
Okay.
So the volunteerism is really important. We all have to do it together. We can't expect something to be done for us. We have to do it together. I suppose the other thing is not to be afraid to ask the question. All that can be said is no. But it wasn't in this case. It was an open door, really. And the other message is that if an organisation, is thinking about doing something that's inclusive, not to be fearful of it. Talk to the people that have that lived experience. It's kind of a bit like our patient partnership thing. Talk, find out, see what works, and then come together. And sometimes it's a compromise, but come together and actually things will work. And most of all, when inclusion is done well, like this is being done and it's being thoughtful, the power of the impact that it has on a person's life, whether it be a young person like Hannah or a child or an adult, but on their broader family and even friendship groups, you can't measure it. This has just been transformative.
Yeah, I'd be very much aligned with what you said, Mairéad. I think ask the question and, knock on the door. I don't believe that there's anyone that will say no. I think that there's a template there. The heavy lift in many cases is already done. It's the template is there. This year alone, we have invited the other 4 counties in Connacht to come and see what the competition is all about. I'd be very hopeful and very positive about where we go next with the Cuimsiú competition and Cuimsiú concept in general within our organisation. I think there's a lot more that we can do. And I look forward, I suppose, to working with the different people in the various different organisations to bring true inclusion into our organisation and really make sure that everyone feels welcome within the organisation and that we give everyone the voice and the music, I suppose, that they have within them and express themselves. So, I'd be very hopeful for where we go next with Cuimsiú, and I think any county board, any provincial council, anyone involved with music, song or dance, or the language, reach out to the Mayo Comhaltas team or the ARC team, and we're more than willing to drive this initiative forward, because really it is fantastic.
And just, I suppose, to say that this year, it has been expanded out a little bit. Mayo was one of the Fleadhs that got festival status this year. And so we're trialling a Cuimsiú session at it, where we can bring the competitors together and they can have a session, the same as any other session on the session trail. But also Ballina Autism Friendly Committee, they have come on board as well. So I suppose for the wider audience that's out there, if you don't have an ARC in your county, there's other organisations out there that are willing to become involved. So just go there. But this model of Cuimsiú can be transferred to other organisations, even outside Comhaltas. Yeah.
And any of those organisations, I think, Mairéad, I think it's really important that they reach out to their local Comhaltas unit as well.
Yeah.
And build that relationship, build that bridge, that moving forward together, we can, achieve the Cuimsiú, and we can drive this forward to where it really should be.
So, Mairéad and Anthony, we're coming near the end now of our podcast, and I can only say congratulations on what was an absolutely wonderful initiative. I know we were talking there earlier, this could be replicated in anything, sport, across any organisation. It's absolutely fabulous. And to see that such a simple question, why can't I be in the Fleadh, and look at the results. So well done, everybody. And Anthony, just one last question for you. What's next, Anthony? Where do we go from here?
So that is the big question. I suppose immediately we're looking forward to the session, as Mairéad has mentioned earlier. The 11th of May is Sunday the 11th of May is our next iteration, let's say, of Cuimsiú. And we're really looking forward to it. As I say, we've a fantastic number of competitors taking part in the competition. So we kick off in Ballina in the secondary school, St Mary Secondary School, at 11 a.m. And anyone that would be interested in coming to the competition, I'd invite them to check out the Mayo Comhaltas website for all the details in relation to the timetabling and the competitions, and when the competition is open for an audience or not, as the case may be. So I'm hoping that we should have a really lovely day, and I think our competitions are scheduled to wrap up maybe around 2:00. So anyone that is interested or is curious, any prospective competitors maybe for next year, or someone that might be on the fence, please come along and see what it's all about. And once again, thanks so much for giving us the opportunity to talk on this.
Great. So all roads lead to Ballina on the 11th of May.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Mairéad and Anthony. I'm just going to finish now. I'm going to give the last word. I mentioned at the beginning the article in the Glóra Hamór magazine by Ellen Hines, and there was a paragraph in that, and it's about one of the competitors, and I'm going to leave that last word to that competitor and to Ellen, who was an adjudicator on the day. Our first competitor was terrified, wanted no clapping, kept his coat on, didn't want to sit, and had his ear defenders hanging from his arm. I could tell he was uncomfortable. I told him I loved his ear defenders and showed him my bright pink ones. Immediately his body language relaxed. I was someone who could understand him. He played his polka, Terry Teehans, got a sweet and left. He was back 2 minutes later for his brother's turn. This time he took his coat off. He was also in miscellaneous and singing. By the time it was his third competition, he wanted us to clap. He felt safe and accepted. This is why this competition, these adaptations were so important. That child would never have coped, even sitting in the mainstream under-12 whistle competition, but here he thrived. Today's episode was produced by Ms. Cora Appleby and Ms. Mairéad Loftus, Specialist Coordinator Nurse Tutors, Centre for Nurse and Midwifery Education, Mayo and Mr. Alan Meany, Radio Producer. And I'm Annette Cuddy, Director, Centre for Nurse and Midwifery Education, Mayo. And that's our final episode in our Inclusion Health Voices from the Margins podcast series. A huge thanks to all our guests on both podcast series, and a special thanks to you, our listeners. Follow us on X at CNME Mayo for education updates.